Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The global car industry is in upheaval, facing one of its most turbulent periods in recent history. What was once a tightly interconnected network of manufacturers, suppliers, and consumers is now being pulled apart by new political and economic forces. Caught in a trade war that's reshaping economies and livelihoods, automakers are scrambling to adapt to a rapidly changing landscape. Every shipment, every deal, and every job is now under scrutiny as countries rethink their strategies. Mexico has made a bold move, raising its own trade barriers and aligning with the US against China's automotive surge. This decision marks a significant shift in alliances, as Mexico repositions itself in the global supply chain. This isn't just about tariffs. It's a realignment of economic power, with millions of jobs and the price of your next car at stake. Consumers, workers, and businesses alike are feeling the ripple effects, from factory floors to dealership lots. Tensions between the US and China have escalated, especially as China's heavily subsidized electric vehicle industry threatens to flood global markets with cheaper cars, putting pressure on established automakers worldwide. Mexico, a key North American trade partner, found itself as a potential backdoor for Chinese cars to enter the US market. This raised alarms in Washington and among American manufacturers, prompting urgent calls for action. By raising tariffs, Mexico has signaled a pivotal shift, dramatically altering the landscape for car makers worldwide. The move is being watched closely by industry leaders and governments alike, as it could set a precedent for future trade policy. We'll break down Mexico's decision, its motivations, and the immediate impact on global automotive giants. What does this mean for the future of car manufacturing, and who stands to gain or lose the most? The events of the past year are shaping the industrial world for decades to come, setting the stage for a new era in automotive history. This is a story that matters to workers, executives, and families across North America, because the future of the car industry will affect us all, from the assembly line to the open road. China's automotive industry has exploded, fueled by massive government subsidies, especially in electric vehicles. Companies like BYD have overtaken global competitors, launching ultra-cheap EVs and flooding the market. Chronic overcapacity means Chinese factories must export aggressively, often selling below cost, a practice known as dumping. This threatens auto industries in the US and Europe, echoing past devastation in steel and solar sectors. Cars are now rolling computers, raising national security concerns about Chinese-made vehicles on Western roads. The US auto sector, a pillar of the economy, faces existential risk from this competition. China defends its subsidies as legitimate, framing Western tariffs as protectionism. Each move sparks retaliation, escalating the trade conflict and threatening the interconnected global economy. The world is now locked in a dangerous cycle of escalation. The stakes for the global auto industry and for international relations have never been higher. Mexico, long a manufacturing hub for North America, has found itself at the center of a new trade controversy. Chinese automakers, looking to bypass hefty US tariffs, saw an opportunity in Mexico's established manufacturing infrastructure. Their strategy was simple yet effective: assemble cars in Mexico and then export them to the US under the USMCA agreement, thus avoiding direct tariffs. This move, however, did not sit well with US policymakers and labor unions, who feared it would undermine American jobs and industry. Facing mounting pressure, Mexico announced a significant policy shift, deciding to more than double tariffs on cars from countries without a free trade agreement, including China. The timing of this announcement was no coincidence. With a USMCA review on the horizon and a more protectionist US administration expected, Mexico's move was strategic. By aligning itself more closely with the US, Mexico aimed to protect the integrity of the North American trade bloc. For Chinese automakers, this policy change means Mexico is no longer a cost-effective gateway to the lucrative US market. For Mexico, it's a calculated risk, strengthening ties with the US while potentially facing economic retaliation from China. This decision has forced global automakers to rethink and reshape their strategies almost overnight. Mexico is betting that its economic future lies firmly within the North American sphere of influence. While the tariff hike still awaits final approval, its impact is already being felt across the industry. The world is closely watching to see if this bold gamble by Mexico will ultimately pay off. The US responded to China's auto ambitions with sweeping tariffs, 100% on Chinese EVs, effectively shutting them out. Canada quickly followed, creating a united North American front. Washington argued that the integrity of the USMCA depended on all partners blocking backdoor imports. Reports warned that without action, Chinese companies would use Mexico to access the US market, nullifying tariffs. Bipartisan consensus formed. Defending the US auto industry required a continent-wide strategy. Mexico's tariff hike was welcomed in Washington as a crucial act of solidarity. The move validated the US hardline approach and protected massive investments in domestic EV production. The North American market is now more unified, but also more isolated. The US fortress has extended its walls, but at what cost? The battle lines are drawn for a new era of automotive competition. The return of the Trump administration in 2025 unleashed a sweeping global tariff offensive, dramatically escalating the ongoing trade war and sending shockwaves through international markets. The world watched as the US adopted a far more aggressive stance, signaling a new era of economic confrontation. A blanket 10% tariff was slapped on all imports, while a punishing 25% targeted autos, steel, and aluminum, industries already under pressure. For carmakers, these measures were nothing short of devastating, forcing them to halt production lines and scramble for alternatives. Tariffs on Chinese goods soared to an unprecedented 115%, making imports from China nearly impossible and cutting off a vital supply of parts and materials for countless American businesses. Even US allies weren't spared. A 25% tariff was imposed on non-US content in vehicles from Canada and Mexico, upending the North American supply chain and threatening the stability of cross-border manufacturing partnerships. Steel and aluminum tariffs doubled overnight, and critical electric vehicle battery materials, like Chinese graphite, faced massive new duties, putting the future of green technology at risk. The administration's goal was clear: force automakers to source everything domestically, from raw materials to finished parts. But this came at a huge cost, as companies struggled to adapt to the new rules and rising expenses. The result was immediate: skyrocketing production costs, widespread supply chain chaos, and a global auto industry teetering on the brink of crisis. Factories slowed or stopped, and workers faced mounting uncertainty. American companies and consumers are now paying the price for this new wave of protectionism. Car prices soared, small businesses struggled to stay afloat, and families felt the pinch in their wallets. The dream of a thriving domestic industry is being paid for with real economic pain. Factory closures, layoffs, and a looming recession threaten communities across the country. Global trade relationships are fracturing under the relentless pressure as countries retaliate and alliances fray. The world's economic order is being reshaped in real time. The auto sector faces a perfect storm of rising costs, shrinking margins, and deep uncertainty about the future. Executives and workers alike are left searching for answers. The world's car makers are bleeding, and the pain is spreading far beyond the factory floor, threatening the stability of the entire global economy. The 2025 tariff war has devastated automakers worldwide. US giants like GM and Stellantis have seen profits collapse, with billions lost in months. International players like Volkswagen, Audi, and Toyota are also reeling from slashed earnings and dire forecasts. Tariffs meant to protect have instead triggered a financial crisis, with cancelled investments and job cuts. Decades of global supply chain integration have been shattered by sudden, massive taxes. The result isn't a domestic boom, but a deep recession for the entire sector. No one is winning this trade war, least of all the companies and workers it was meant to help. The auto industry is bleeding red ink, and the wounds are deep. The USMCA's rules of origin require 75% North American content for tariff-free car trade. Many automakers found it cheaper to pay a small tariff than rework global supply chains, until the new 25% tariff on non-US content changed the game. Now, companies must source almost everything domestically or face crippling costs. This aggressive move has thrown the system into legal chaos. Courts have challenged the administration's authority, but tariffs remain pending a Supreme Court decision. Retaliation has been swift. Canada, Mexico, the EU, and Brazil have all imposed their own tariffs on US goods. China has blacklisted US companies and halted Boeing orders. What began as a regional dispute is now a global trade free-for-all. The USMCA once a symbol of cooperation, is now a flashpoint in a damaging conflict. Alliances are fracturing, and the rules-based trading order is at risk. The legal and economic uncertainty is paralyzing the industry. Beyond tariffs, the auto industry faces a grave human rights crisis: forced labor in the supply chain. Much of the world's aluminum, used in cars, is linked to forced labor in China's Xinjiang region. Automakers now face legal and ethical dilemmas, risking penalties and reputational damage. US laws ban imports made with forced labor, adding pressure to reshore supply chains. The push to move production out of China is now about ethics as much as economics. Untangling these supply chains is complex, but ignoring the human cost is no longer an option. The global auto industry stands at a crossroads, battered by tariffs, collapsing profits, and ethical crises. Mexico's tariff wall was just the start of a much larger trade conflict. The USMCA is strained, legal battles rage, and the industry faces recession. The Supreme Court's decision on tariffs could bring more upheaval, no matter the outcome. As nations retreat into economic blocs, the principles of free trade are under threat. This is more than a story about cars, it's about the future of global prosperity. Navigating this new world will require more than tariffs. It demands cooperation and vision. The choices made now will shape the global economy for a generation.